The American Civil War didn't happen in a vacuum. It wasn't a one off. And I was really pleased that Niels Eichhorn and Duncan Campbell wrote about that in this book, The Civil War in the Age of Nationalism. It's printed by LSU Press. It just came out earlier this year. And I was so pleased to grab a copy of it. And it is incredible. Here's why. I'm a big comparative history person. And when we're talking about some of these grander ideas, I like to see if this comes about in a vacuum, like it's all a one off, or if this is something of a larger movement going on around the world or just in countries that are next door to each other. And Niels and Duncan do a fantastic job of showing that the American Civil War happened in an era of an age of revolutions. There are revolutions happening in Europe in the 1840s, especially in 1848. There are leaders who are trying to figure out what it means to be a leader of a nation, what it means to be a nation in general, and what it means to be a citizen. So, the main term in the book title, I would say, is nationalism, the age of nationalism. So, what is nationalism? Well, according to Britannica, nationalism is an ideology based on the premise that the individual's loyalty and devotion to the nation state surpasses other individual or group interests. Nationalism is a more modern movement in world history, and we're starting to see that kind of cauldron begin to bubble in the mid 19th century, right around the time of the American Civil War era. Germany is trying to figure out who they are, and it won't be until the post war era that we see the rise of Bismarck and the nation begin to come together. In the pre Civil War era, we're seeing France still trying to figure out who they are as a nation in the post Napoleonic era, as far as Napoleon Bonaparte is concerned. But now they have a leader, Napoleon III, who has been villainized by some and lionized by others for what he had done. In fact, Niels and Duncan believe that he is one of the VIPs, if you will, of the period, one of the MVPs of the period. So if you want to know more about someone in Europe during the American Civil War who was driving some of these ideas, you may want to check out Napoleon III. They also pinpoint some other movements going on around the world, not just in Europe, but there are issues evolving about nationalism and nation states in Central America and in Asia as well. So it is really a great comparative world history of this idea of nationhood and citizenship. And do you put your nation before you put other interests? We see some of this rise today, which is why I think this comparative history is timely. And Niels and Duncan actually move the needle forward in the conclusion of the book into the First World War. And Niels knew from knowing me that I would appreciate that First World War look, that kind of glance into the First World War era, if you will, because the foundations are laid in the 19th century for what we will see occur in the 20th, especially the early 20th century. The Franco Prussian War, the Crimean War, these things lead to future conflicts because cultures are slamming together for the first time and trying to figure out who they really are and what it means to be a part of a particular nation. Colonization also comes up regularly, and it has to because it is a major issue in the 19th century. It had been going on for decades and generations, but it's starting to come to a head as far as these nations wanting to have a piece of the colonial pie. So, what do those people who are colonized mean to these larger nation states, mean to the colonizer? These are all brought about in this book, and I was really, really intrigued by it. Really love the comparative history look at things. We need to have more of it when we're looking at the mid 19th century, especially for North American audiences. We need to be looking at what is going on in Europe, what is going on in Asia at the same time to understand, is this part of a larger movement? And Niels and Duncan prove to me that the American Civil War is part of a larger movement of trying to figure out who, quote, we are as a people, figuring out, is this another form of revolution? Is this another form of a European secession movement that is occurring in the United States? It is really a great read. And if you are a fan of trying to understand the mid 19th century world, you're going to want to pick up this book. You will not regret picking this book up. And I was really, really happy to get my copy, and you will as well.